Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Honored to be a original co-sponsor of HR 2967. I think that it's important to note that this bill does three things. It preserves the standards, our national delivery standards for the delivery of the mail, very, very important to our economy. It also makes sure that that postal employees and retirees are protected. I think the difference you see between the bill that Mr. Cummings has presented and the one that Mr. Issa has presented for markup today is that I think Mr. Cummings' bill that we're supporting here today is a very thoughtful and responsible way of making sure that those standards are preserved, but at the same time making sure that the burden of the transformation that must occur is not borne entirely by employees of the post office and its retirees. You know, it's ironic that when the Pew Institute did a survey of customer satisfaction among public servants, Congress, it came in very, very low, somewhere between the swine flu and the Taliban. On the other hand, our postal employees repeatedly, year after year, come in at the top of the scale. They've done that by their hard work, by their diligence, in a very, very tough environment. This is a situation, look, we realize in this bill that change is necessary, and we embrace that. But we embrace it in a way that does not diminish national delivery standards, that we maintain universal service, and that we respect the service of our postal employees in a way that, as the chairman, as the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, has outlined, there's been an acknowledged overpayment by the Postal Service of about $7 billion. Now, if we take that reimbursement, that $7 billion, and use part of it for an early retirement incentive, there are 150,000 postal employees today that could retire with a little bit of that encouragement that an early retirement offering would provide. Many of these employees, I think, were ready to retire before this economic crisis occurred. They saw the value of their thrift savings plans, the value of their 401k, the value of their homes diminish, like a lot of other Americans, and they decided that they had to keep on working. I think if we provide a little bit of incentive, we can approach that. The Postal Service wants to reduce their workforce by about 120,000 people, and I think that this early retirement type incentive would go a long way toward meeting that number. We also have 88,000 postal employees that don't have layoff protections, and that might provide an area where other reductions could occur. But I applaud Ranking Member Cummings and Lynch and Kucinich, my friend. They both worked for many years in terms of protecting the dignity of workers within the postal system, and also really protecting universal service, something that our country and our economy rely heavily upon. Thank you.
And now the distinguished gentleman from Ohio, Lynch and Kucinich.
I'm pleased to be here to join our leader, Congressman Cummings, who's the ranking member of the full committee, and also the leader of the subcommittee, Mr. Lynch, for this important announcement to let the American people know that an effort is being made by congressional leaders to save the post office. This is important to the American people because every day when you go to that post box at your house, you come to expect that people are communicating with you. Despite the internet, there are still many Americans who rely on the post office as a primary means of conveying written communication. The principle that Mr. Lynch talked about, universal service, This is a fundamental right in a democratic society. Because if universal service is impaired, if you start to change the access that people have based on their income, you destroy an essential part of a democratic society, which is the ability of people to communicate with each other and to transact commerce. So this bill by Mr. Cummings and with the support of Mr. Lynch not only deserves support from members of our committee and members of the United States Congress, it deserves the support of the American people, because it will protect universal service. It will stop the insidious effort to try to privatize the postal service and deliver it like some ripe turkey to the private interest, who would then increase the cost of service and cut the ability of people to be able to transact business through the postal service. We don't want any more increased costs, cuts in services. The Cummings bill, Mr. Lynch, helps to protect against that. And finally, it is going to protect postal workers' jobs. To Mr. Cummings and Mr. Lynch, just last week we dedicated the post office to a man who, on Valentine's Day, 3 years ago, was delivering mail like every other day, but he was struck down and killed. It's an extraordinary development. And so we named the post office in his memory. And there were postal workers who were there, and they liked the fact that people remember them. We have to remember those who deliver the mail. They're public servants. They ought to be respected. And we should care about their job. We should work to protect their job. That's why this bill is so important, because it will protect the jobs of people who do the work. It will ensure universal service, and it will stop any wholesale raids on the postal service through privatization. So I want to congratulate Mr. Cummings for this landmark bill that could not come at a more important time. This is the time. And thanks to Mr. Lynch, who's been absolutely diligent and vigilant in watching for the Postal Service's interest and the interest of the American people as the head of the subcommittee. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll take your questions, yes.
I'm not completely familiar with the ESSA legislation, but could you just give me a critique of it, especially according to the highlights that you mentioned in your bill, like universal service? What is it missing that your bill has?
One of the things that is a big difference between ISO and this bill is with regard to employees. This bill basically would open the door for something like a control board, some similar to the rule that's established here in D.C., to look at the employees and basically do away with the provisions of the most recent bargaining agreement and basically fire without any kind of dignity. And what we're trying to do, and Mr. Lynch talked extensively about this, is that we're trying to make sure that our organization that has already, since 2008, let go 100,000 people, and in the past year or so, let go 21,000. We want to make sure that those folks are treated with dignity. We also keep in mind that we are living in some very, very difficult times. Republicans came into office, they campaigned back in 2010 about jobs. We haven't had any real jobs movement. The last thing we want to do, is destroying jobs and putting people in a worse situation, that is, unable to provide for their families. And so that's a major, major thing. The other thing that I think this bill does more is, I've said to our committee members that whenever we're dealing with these difficult problems, we have to deal with them like a family would deal with their problems. Families deal with difficult problems every day. And so you try to, we are looking at the long range view. We realize the post office is going to be around. If you don't write anything else today, if you don't pick up anything else I say, my cameraman, pick up this. The post office will continue to deliver the mail. So since we know it's going to deliver the mail, that's something that I refuse to let happen, that is, that it not deliver the mail, then we have to make sure that we right size it. And I think that we are more, as opposed to just saying, let's just deal with a short-term thing, get rid of some people. What we're saying is we want to make sure that the post office is equipped with this innovation person. We want somebody that whole role, the entire role would be every day trying to figure out how do they keep up with innovation and make sure that we are doing everything that we can, that they can to make sure that the postal service benefits from that. It deals more with the streamlining of regulations so that they can work out agreements with various private and other entities, so that with regard to pricing of certain products, things of that nature, it provides them with more latitude to deal with leases. For example, this is just hypothetical. If we had to close a post office, one of the things we want to be able to do is, and we want them to be able to do, is have the latitude to perhaps go to a Target or another store or whatever. And I don't want to just name Target, but others who have stores throughout the community, and maybe there's some kind of agreement that they can work out where they can rent some space in those places. In other words, I think what has happened too often, we have put the Postal Service in somewhat of a straitjacket, and we need to give them a certain level of flexibility so that they can do the things that are necessary to move into this era of the internet and take advantage of it. So there are a lot of things, but again, we're trying to make sure that we maintain jobs, that we maintain the dignity of the worker, and we got to keep in mind that every single member of Congress, I've got members of Congress from the Tea Partiers included, saying, "What can you do to save my post office?" They're telling me I'm catching hell because they want to save it, and I'm saying they need to work with us to try to make sure that we provide a comprehensive, put forth a comprehensive effort to have that long-range plan so that they are able to have the flexibility that they need, but at the same time make sure that we hold on to as many jobs as we possibly can. And for those, and we admit that and everybody admits that we've got to downsize. Keep in mind what I said from the very beginning, that there has been a substantial decrease in first-class mail. And when the only money you're getting is the stamp money, then there's a problem with that. So we've got to decrease, but you can also decrease with dignity. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Sure. So you said that you don't plan for the Postal Service to stop delivering the mail.
A little louder, please.
Sir?
A little louder.
You said you don't want the Postal Service to stop delivering mail, obviously.
It won't.
But they say that they might have to stop by the end of next summer if something serious doesn't happen in the short term. So you're talking about plans for the long term. What are you going to do in the short term before the end of next summer when they run out of money?
Well, what they're saying is that because of the unusual requirement that the Postal Service pre-fund its retiree benefits, the legislation set out in the Postal Accountability Enhancement Act requires them on a certain date, the legislation states on such and such a date, you deposit $5.5 billion, and so they've been doing that for a couple of years now. This goes back to 2006, so they've been doing this since 2006. Back in 2006, we had a fairly robust economy. The legislation doesn't acknowledge what's going on right now. What Ranking Member Cummings pointed out at the beginning, if you go back to 2007 and you compare it to today, annually we have 40 billion less pieces of mail per year being delivered. That's huge. 40 billion per year less. That's on mail volume. We still have 38,000 post offices. People are in a trend where everybody's getting the idea that you pay your bills electronically. That's reduced that first-class mail, which is the real moneymaker for the post office, tremendously. So what they're saying is, if we do nothing, absolutely nothing, then this is the consequences. We're not going to do nothing. Even Mr. Ice's bill, with all its flaws, and there are many, grants an increase in the debt limit that the Postal Service has to operate under. They have a $15 billion debt limit that they reach, or are reaching right now, and he extends that to buy them time. There are elements in Mr. Cummings' bill, and I have a companion bill, that would also buy considerable time, perhaps 18 months to 2 years, within which time we could institute some major changes here. We don't need 38,000 post offices as we did some time ago, and we see the volume of mail continuing to decline. We also have technologies out there that are geared to reducing the volume of mail. Right now in Sweden and I think Norway, they have a system where your mail, when it comes into the post office, comes up on your computer screen, and you can click on the mail that you don't want delivered. As a consumer, I know that there'd be a lot less so-called junk mail coming into my home if I had that ability, and it's probably that way with a lot of mail. So we have to look down the road and see how do we reform the post office so that it is a sustainable system that treats its employees fairly, is responsible to its retirees, maintains that universal service, maintains delivery standards. Because businesses are used to getting, their correspondence every day, no matter where they're located in the United States. So I think that's a worst-case scenario that the Postal Service is putting out there. I think they have to put that out there. They're being honest. If we did nothing, that's where we would be. But I don't think anybody in Congress intends to do nothing.
Does this bill or your bill boost the borrowing limit the way the ICE bill does?
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
Does this bill or your companion bill boost the borrowing limit the way the ICE bill does?
Well, not in the same fashion. If there's a dispute, and I think the Postal Service is correct, that they have overpaid into both the CSRS and the Federal Employee Retirement System. The amount on the CSRS, the Civil Service Retirement System overpayment, is close to $65 billion. So, obviously, if any portion of that, significant portion of that came over to the United States Postal Service, they wouldn't have to raise their debt limit. They'd probably operate at a small profit.
Take some more questions. Yes.
Do you think you'll be able to get enough support for people to vote against the ICE bill?
What we're going to do is we're going to push hard. My initial conversations with Mr. Eisler Chairman Eisler was that he wanted to have a cooperation in trying to come up with a bipartisan bill. So far, that has not panned out. So we just have to see. But, in the end, it may end up having a combination of this bill and his bill. Again, we're talking about bipartisanship. We're not talking about my way or the highway. We're talking about trying to work together because the goal has to be delivering for the American people, and that's what it's about. So, I'm an optimist, and this job, I think, is when you're talking about making sure that an institution that has been around for so long and done so much, making sure it's viable and strong, we have to be, and I'm looking forward to working with you.
One of the other, just to that same question. The companion bill to Mr. Cummings' bill is my bill, 1351. We've got over 200 co-sponsors. I think the last count we had 27 Republicans on board that bill. So there is some demonstration of bipartisanship, and we're hoping that it carries over to Mr. Cummings' bill as well.
And the other thing is that the White House is going to be, they present some bullets and they're going to present their bill. So it's going to be a combination of us working together to make this happen, and we're going to be pushing hard. Yes, sir.
So, Congressman Lynch, you're not withdrawing your bill and your previous bill.
I am not. No.
So why introduce yet another bill?
My bill was geared towards preventing the default, actually giving the Postal Service some space within which to, reduce the number of post offices, to conduct some of the tough medicine that we have to endure. I think what Mr. Cummings has done is expanded on that. He's actually come out and said, we're going to, well, in many ways, this is a response to the ISA bill that wasn't in existence when I filed my original bill. So he obviously responds to the ISA legislation that's going to be marked up today, but also goes a step further to try to introduce this innovation concept, by which he hopes to make the Postal Service more competitive.
It's so easy to stand on the sidelines and let things happen. You're absolutely right. What Mr. Lynch said is absolutely right. But we're not private plants up here. We've come here to legislate and to work with our colleagues. And so what it is that we're trying to, a lot of folks will say, well, how are you going to do certain things? And what we've tried to do is create a roadmap, a guide to try to make sure that the postal system can then work to get to where it has to go. So,
just real quick.
And then I'm going to take this young lady's question again and finish. Go ahead, another press conference. Yes.
Could you talk about the postal provisions in the CR? House Democrats, I understand, are voting against the CR for other reasons, but obviously the Postal Service says it needs the extension that's in there. How do you balance that?
Well, I think it presents a difficult situation. I think that clearly the CR will take us to November 18th. And as you well know, Speaker Pelosi today was very clear that she has, and the Democrats have concerns about the pay for with regard to disaster aid. And so, I expect that the CR will pass and will give at least that November 18th extension, particularly with regard to this $5.5 billion that Mr. Lynch has been talking about. So I think we're just going to see how that pans out. But again, that we had put forth legislation. I had a bill to extend 90 days so that we could try to work this thing out. And the majority decided to go with CR and everything else is in November 18th, so it's consistent with that. But again, there is a bit of a conflict here, but I do expect probably in the end that the CR will pass and will have at least until November 18th. Thank you all very much.